Some comebacks are funny, some are brutal, but every once in a while, someone says one sentence so perfectly timed, so savage, and so unexpected that the entire room freezes before bursting into laughter. These are not just insults. These are verbal knockouts. And the funniest part is that most of the people getting roasted walked straight into the trap themselves. Some insults land softly, some sting for a moment, and then there are the ones that feel like they bring an entire room to a complete stop. A good clapback is not just a reply. It is timing, confidence, instinct, and a little bit of danger packed into one sentence. The most satisfying comebacks are the ones where the person walking into them does not even realize they have set the trap themselves. They ask the wrong question, make the wrong joke, push the wrong person, and suddenly the whole room is watching them get verbally dismantled in real time. Everyone loves a good comeback story, right? People love watching someone rise from the bottom, fight through humiliation, and somehow return stronger than before. We cheer for underdogs, we remember the legends, and we celebrate the people who refuse to stay down. But in comedy, a comeback means something very different. It is not about redemption, it is about survival. It is about hearing something disrespectful, processing it in half a second, and firing back with a line so sharp that the other person has no choice but to laugh, freeze, or pretend they did not hear it. That is why standing in front of a comedian and asking a reckless question is never a safe decision. It is like handing chaos a microphone and hoping it behaves. The moment someone tries to be clever with a professional joke teller, the entire energy shifts. The audience leans in, the comedian smiles, and before the person can even regret speaking, the punchline is already in the air. One of the most brutal examples starts with a question that seems harmless at first. Someone asks Mr. White what the first meal would be if he had to feed them. Without hesitation, he replies, "Salad." It is not loud, it is not complicated, and that is exactly why it works. The simplicity makes it deadly. No long setup, no wasted breath, just one word that turns a casual question into a public roast. Then there are moments where someone starts speaking with complete confidence, only to be stopped immediately. An audience member begins making a point about transgender people, but before they can even finish, they are interrupted with the kind of response that snaps the entire room awake. The comeback basically says, "You wanted to say something, but you have already been talking nonstop." It is savage because it does not even attack the argument first. It attacks the fact that the person has dominated the room for too long, and suddenly everyone understands exactly why the response hit so hard. Some comebacks are not just funny, they feel like verbal violations. They cross the line between ordinary teasing and total destruction. One person tries to talk about how many books they get, using their past as a setup, and the room seems ready for something serious. Then the question turns toward Dr. Phil, asking who his favorite was, and the response is instant discomfort. The silence after a joke like that becomes part of the comedy. Nobody knows whether to laugh, gasp, or look away. Another moment comes from a sports interview involving Taylor Swift and the Super Bowl. A question is asked with complete seriousness, but the phrase used makes absolutely no sense to the person hearing it. He pauses, confused, and asks what it means. The person repeats it, trying to explain, but the confusion only grows. Then the entire thing turns into a classic playground-style setup. "What's the matter with you?" The timing is so clean that it feels accidental, but that is what makes it perfect. The person asking the question becomes the punchline without even realizing they were walking straight into it. Then a conversation turns toward phobias. Someone asks what else the person dislikes besides treadmills, clearly expecting a normal answer. Instead, the silence and hesitation become the joke. Sometimes the best comeback is not a full sentence. Sometimes it is the pause, the look, and the awareness that everyone in the room already knows where the joke is going. In another exchange, someone tells a performer that they were the worst-looking cast member in I Am Legend. Instead of getting offended, the person turns the insult into something even funnier by reminding everyone that the cast included zombies and a dog. So if he was the worst-looking one, that means he was being ranked below the undead and the animal. The room laughs because he takes the insult, repeats it, and makes it sound even more ridiculous than the person who said it intended. But the comeback does not stop there. When someone keeps pushing, the response turns personal and cuts straight through the tensio. And it is the kind of line that makes everyone react at once because it is too direct to ignore. The whole moment proves that if you throw a cheap insult at the wrong person, you might get something much sharper thrown back. Some clapbacks become iconic because they happen in movies, but others become legendary because they were never even in the script. One famous example comes from The Rock in Fast and Furious, where a quick improvised joke about someone's forehead caught everyone off guard. The line was playful, but the delivery made it unforgettable. The best part is that it felt natural, like something a real person would say in the middle of a chaotic conversation. That is why it stuck. It did not sound written. It sounded alive. Reality television has its own version of this. Someone says they would never trust another woman around their man. It is meant to sound powerful, territorial, and intimidating, but the reply flips the whole thing instantly. Thankfully, there is no man to hide in the first place. The room reacts because the comeback does not just answer the insult, it removes the foundation of it. The original line was supposed to make one person look dangerous, but the response makes them look lonely, insecure, and exposed. Another moment begins with a dismissive comment about gay people and strength. The person speaking tries to make it sound like a joke, but the response turns it around by pointing out that a gay army would absolutely be intimidating. The humor comes from the twist. Instead of accepting the insult, the comeback reframes it with confidence and swagger, turning the attempt at mockery into a celebration of attitude, unity, and style. Theo Von is one of those comedians who can make a savage line sound almost innocent. His delivery is casual, soft, and slow, which makes the punchlines even more dangerous. Guests on his podcast often do not realize they have been roasted until the sentence has already landed. Someone talks about a music video involving skydiving and says they would never skydive in real life. Theo responds with a line about going down quickly, and the guest only has a moment to process it before the room starts reacting. That is his style. He does not announce the joke. He lets it sneak in quietly. Another person proudly says they are 39 but do not look like the typical 39-year-old. They expect agreement, maybe even a compliment. Instead, they are told plainly that yes, they do look 39 and that it is perfectly fine. The response is not dramatic, but it hits because it destroys the little illusion the person was trying to protect. Sometimes honesty, delivered with perfect timing, is more savage than any insult. Then there are comebacks that escalate before anyone can stop them. Someone begins asking about children, mothers, and relationships, trying to embarrass another person. The conversation turns messy fast, and when someone says "about 4" while talking about different women, the room immediately catches the awkwardness. The phrase "about 4" sounds unsure in the worst possible way, and the follow-up reaction makes it even funnier. When a person cannot even answer a serious personal question with certainty, the joke practically writes itself. In another iconic reality show moment, a tattoo competition argument turns vicious. One contestant tries to dismiss another by suggesting their work has already been done before. The response is calm at first. "I'm still here." That is the kind of comeback that does not need shouting. It simply reminds everyone that survival in a competition speaks louder than criticism. But then the argument gets uglier, and one person delivers the now famous line, questioning how someone can look so much older than their actual age. The room freezes because the insult is so direct, so personal, and so unexpected that nobody knows how to respond. Food shows can create surprisingly savage moments too. A chef explains a dish and tries to compare it to a British version of carbonara because it has certain ingredients, but the Italian guest is not having it. He responds with a now legendary line, "If his grandmother had wheels, she would have been a bike." The meaning is clear. You cannot keep adding random conditions and pretending something becomes the thing you want it to be. It is funny because it is absurd, but it is also a perfect argument. The comparison makes no sense, and the comeback exposes that instantly. In another hosting moment, someone asks a guest, "Can you read?" trying to make them look unprepared or foolish. The guest fires back with, "Can you host?" It is a clean reversal. The first question was supposed to embarrass the guest, but the reply shifts all the pressure back onto the host. That is what makes a comeback powerful. It does not just defend. It attacks the weakness hiding inside the original insult. Ricky Gervais has built an entire reputation around saying uncomfortable things direct. Lie to celebrities' faces. His comedy often works because he says what other people would only whisper. In one moment with Bob Geldof, he casually slips in a roast about the possibility of sleeping in a car, then points toward him as the comparison. The line is quick, cold, and perfectly timed. What makes it work is how relaxed Ricky sounds while saying it. He does not force the joke. He just drops it into the room and lets everyone else deal with the impact. In another exchange, someone talks about working extremely hard for their dreams and suggests that not everyone is meant to succeed. It sounds inspirational at first, but then the reply slices through the speech by bringing up autotune. The comeback is effective because it challenges the idea of natural talent in the most direct way possible. The person was trying to sound superior, but the response implies that technology is doing a lot of the heavy lifting. A different argument turns into a battle of confidence. One person says they do not need anyone else to define what they are or are not, then thanks the other person for being a fan. That kind of comeback works because it refuses to look wounded. It takes criticism and converts it into admiration. Instead of saying, "You hurt me," it says, "You are paying too much attention to me." That is a much stronger position. Then comes a body-related insult aimed at a middle-aged man. Someone says he will never have a six-pack and begins counting his stomach rolls. It is cruel, but the energy of the moment is built around humiliation. The reason it lands in the scene is not because it is elegant, but because it is blunt. Reality television often lives in that uncomfortable space where people say the thing everyone else knows they should not say out loud. But nothing is more humbling than trying to sound smart and getting corrected by someone much younger. In one classroom-style moment, a child is asked to name the invisible line that runs around the middle of the earth. The expected answer is the equator, but the child begins reasoning that if something is invisible, it cannot be seen, and if it cannot be seen, then perhaps it cannot be named. The logic is completely wrong, but the confidence is spectacular. Then someone points out that air is invisible too, yet we still have a name for it. The correction lands so perfectly that the entire moment becomes comedy. In another quick exchange, someone asks whether a person has multiple colors, and the response brings in every shade of their mother's lipstick. It is random, personal, and oddly specific, which is often what makes a roast memorable. A good comeback does not always need to make perfect logical sense. Sometimes it only needs to be surprising enough to knock the other person off balance. There's also a moment where someone says something awkward about their first intimate experience, and the reply is dry enough to make the whole thing sting. Instead of reacting with shock, the person simply says they are glad it was remembered. The humor comes from understatement. A wild statement meets a calm response, and the contrast does all the work. Another old-school style roast involves a person suggesting that the best way to deal with something is to lie down and let the sun handle it. The other person responds that it sounds like an excellent idea, but adds that they are not as dumb as they look. The comeback that follows is immediate. How could you be? It is one of those classic lines that sounds simple, but it works because it turns self-defense into self-destruction. The person opened the door, and the reply walked right through it. Some clapbacks end in silence, others end in tears. Reality shows are especially good at producing those moments because emotions are already high. In one Love Island exchange, someone tells another person they are so mature that it is embarrassing. The target does not take it quietly. Instead, they fires back by pointing out that the other person has repeatedly been treated like a backup option. That kind of comeback hurts because it touches a real insecurity. It is not just a joke anymore. It becomes personal history thrown back across the room. Sometimes the roast is about style. Someone asks how much another person paid for a suit, and the answer is around $1,000. The response is calm and devastating. It looks like it. That line works because it sounds like a compliment for half a second, then reveals itself as an insult. The person spent a lot of money, but the implication is that the suit still looks unimpressive. Then there is the classic setup where someone says, "You know who was asking about you the other day?" The other person naturally asks, "Who?" Then comes the answer, "Nobody." It is childish, simple, and still effective. Some jokes never age because the structure is perfect. It creates a tiny moment of hope and then immediately crushes it. Hollywood interviews also produce awkwardly funny moments. Before filming an intimate scene, one actor says they took stomach medicine, turning what could have been a glamorous behind-the-scenes story into something uncomfortable and deeply unromantic. Another actor responds with an equally awkward memory from the scene, and the room reacts because nobody expected the conversation to become that honest. The humor comes from destroying the polished image of movie romance and replacing it with the strange reality of filming. In another introduction, someone confidently calls themselves the biggest and the baddest. When asked why they believe that, they say people tell them so and they believe it. The reply is brutal in its simplicity. There are a lot of liars nowadays. That is the perfect kind of comeback because it attacks the source of the confidence without needing to argue further. If the praise came from liars, then the entire self-image collapses. One of the most satisfying television moments involves Katie Hopkins talking about how she judges children's social class based on their names. She lists names she dislikes, including names connected to seasons, places, and certain cultural references. She says all of this with complete confidence, as though she has discovered some grand social truth. Then the host quietly points out that her own child is named India. The room shifts immediately. The hypocrisy is too obvious to hide. Katie tries to explain that her case is different, but by then the comeback has already done its work. The best clapbacks often do not require volume. Sometimes all it takes is one calm fact placed in exactly the right spot. Another moment begins with someone asking to be helped down like a gentleman would. Instead of playing along, the person nearby makes a sharp comment about how believable it is that the marriage did not work out. It is quick, mean, and perfectly timed. The line works because it responds not just to the request, but to the attitude behind it. Political conversations can also create unexpected comedy. Someone brings up a young African-American man wearing a Make America Great Again hat in a cheesecake factory and argues that he should not be verbally attacked or made to feel unwelcome. The host asks another guest to respond, and instead of diving immediately into the politics, the guest pauses and jokes that he is more confused about what the person was doing at a cheesecake factory in the first place. It is a strange pivot, but that is why it breaks the tension. Sometimes a joke avoids the obvious fight and finds a completely different angle. Car conversations can become brutal too. Someone sees a car that looks exactly like another person's and says it is pretty cool. Then they immediately add that the other car is way cooler. The person being roasted plays along, saying the driver probably has a hotter girlfriend too. It becomes funny because the target accepts the joke and extends it rather than resisting. A comeback does not always have to be defensive. Sometimes leaning into the insult makes the moment even better. A sports broadcast moment features a line about something small being surprisingly impressive. The setup seems innocent, but the reply is instant. The host would know all about that. It is the kind of joke that makes everyone in the studio react because it is short, cheeky, and perfectly placed. Live television makes these moments even better because nobody can edit the silence afterward. Restaurant arguments create a different kind of chaos. Someone whistles to get attention, and the person being whistled at snaps back that they are not a dog. The response from the other person is even rougher, saying they look more like one. From there, the situation spirals into insults about plates, leads, and behavior. It is not refined comedy, but it has the raw energy of people reacting without filters. In another savage entertainment moment, Mark Ruffalo sits there while Josh Widdicombe criticizes Marvel movies right in front of him. It is already awkward because Mark is part of that world and everyone knows it, but instead of reacting angrily, he waits for the right opening and drops a calm, perfectly timed response. That is what makes the moment memorable. He does not need to dominate the conversation. He just waits until the joke can land cleanly. Then there are interviews where people ask what someone is afraid of, expecting a normal answer like flying, heights, or spiders. Instead, the answer swerves into something so unexpected that the room does not know what to do with it. Shock becomes the joke. The audience reacts not because the line is polished, but because it is so sudden and uncomfortable that it catches everyone off guard. Another confrontation begins with someone telling another person not to dye their hair blonde again. The person refuses to be told what to do, and the situation quickly turns into a personal insult. The response that follows is crude and chaotic, and the room immediately reek. T.S. These are the kinds of clapbacks that do not feel written. They feel like pure impulse, which is why they can become memorable even when they are messy. Howard Stern-style exchanges often rely on innuendo and timing. Someone asks if he is always quick, and he replies that in some things he is, while in other things he prefers to take his time. The other person says they have no idea what he means, and the comeback is smooth. Somehow, he does not doubt that. It is a quiet insult disguised as a response. The target walks into it by pretending not to understand, and the reply makes that lack of understanding the joke. In another celebrity moment, someone congratulates Kevin Hart on announcing that he is having another baby girl. Someone jokes that he cannot make boys, and the teasing begins. Kevin tries to keep control of the moment, but the conversation keeps poking at him. Then another person adds that once Kevin finds out who the father is for his boy, things will become interesting. The line is outrageous, and Kevin's reaction makes it even funnier. Sometimes the best part of a comeback is not the line itself, but watching the person decide whether to laugh or fight back. A gender question comes up when someone asks why women are allowed to ask a man's age, but men are often told not to ask a woman's age. The answer is reasonable at first. It depends on context, and some women would not be offended. Then there is a pause, almost as if the person expects the question to be asked. The other person notices immediately and says he will not ask. Instead, he asks how much she weighs. The joke works because it moves from one sensitive question to another even more sensitive question, exposing the social rules around personal boundaries. Then someone asks whether they look better in pictures or in person. The answer is one word: in theory. It is a beautifully cruel comeback because it refuses to choose either option. Pictures are not better. Real life is not better. Only the idea of the person works. That is the kind of line that sounds elegant and devastating at the same time. Some comebacks are fired in the heat of the moment, but others are carefully planned. In one dramatic confrontation, someone admits they went to a party with a man named Brian, went home with him, and slept with him. They expect shock. They expect betrayal. But the response is calm. The other person already knows. When asked how, they reveal that the whole thing was planned. Brian had made a bet that he could sleep with her, and now the person is out $50 and a pack of cigarettes. The cruelty of the reveal is what makes it unforgettable. It is not just a comeback. It is a trap that had been waiting to close. Another quick roast targets someone's smile, saying that if they smile too fast, their lips might bleed. It is oddly specific, which makes it feel sharper. The best insults often create an image so strange that people remember it even after the moment passes. The final exchange brings everything full circle. Someone says they grew up in Albuquerque and asks whether there were any cool places there or anything the other person enjoyed about their hometown. It sounds like a warm, nostalgic question. Then the response comes. They used to visit the person's mother once in a while. The room instantly understands the joke, and the innocent hometown question turns into one last savage punchline. That is the beauty of a truly great clapback. It does not need a long speech. It does not need preparation, volume, or anger. It only needs the perfect moment. One sentence can flip the power in a room. One reply can turn confidence into panic. And one perfectly delivered line can live forever online, replayed again and again by people who love watching someone step into a verbal trap and realize, just a second too late, that there is no way out. So now the only question left is simple. Which comeback made you laugh the hardest? Which clapback was the most savage one in this video? Drop your favorite in the comments, because I want to know which comeback made you laugh the hardest. And if you enjoy watching people get humbled in the most unexpected ways, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more moments like this.